We will call the City of Riviera Beach City Council Budget Workshop to order, August 31st, 2021, 6:07 p.m. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Ronnie Felder. Chairperson Shirley Lanier.
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Kashamba Miller Anderson.
Hey, how you doing?
Councilperson Tradrick McCoy.
Here.
Councilperson Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Councilperson Julia Botel.
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans.
Present.
City Clerk Claudine Anthony is present. City Attorney Don Nguyen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Tradrick McCoy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Evans.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Tonight's presentation is the part of the budget process whereby we go into each of the individual departments to share any significant budget modifications, and then staff does talk about any tweaks or modification in regards to some of the personnel changes, if any. The sequence of presentations will be public safety first, so Fire Chief John Curd, Police Chief Nathan Osgood, Interim Executive Director Ms. Deirdre Jacobs for Utility District. I will be doing the presentation for the Community Redevelopment Agency, Public Works and Fleet Services, Stormwater, Mr. Clark, Development Services, Mr. Clarence Sermon, Parks and Recreation Director Blankenship, Library, Mr. Rodney Freeman, Information Technology, Mr. Chris Prasad, Human Resources, Ms. Eureka Young, Procurement, Ms. McBride, City Clerk, Ms. Claudine Anthony, City Attorney's Office, I will be making that presentation, Finance, Mr. Sherman, City Administration, myself, as well as Youth Empowerment, and Civil Drug Court and Reentry. I believe Mr. Sherman is going to make those presentations. So all the budget direction that was provided to the executive management team was to ensure that the city's budget, which is a spending plan, is consistent with the Riviera Beach 2030, the strategic goals that the board has set forth. So everything that we do as an agency and everything that we look to do should roll up into one of those 5 categories. So you heard a little bit yesterday about the goals and objectives and how those align with the strategic areas of focus for each of the departments. And so the budget document, which is the spending tool, aligns with that and helps us accomplish those overarching goals, as well as the goals and objectives that were set forth in the department's budget presentations over the last couple of days. So the first presentation we have will be the fire department, and Fire Chief John Kerr will make the presentation. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Council, good evening. John Curd, Fire Chief. This year, Fire Rescue has very little budget modification to come forth with. The only modification to our staffing is adding 2 EMS captains positions. Currently, we have 1 that is a 40-hour position. This is going to allow us to have 3 operational EMS captains that are going to allow us to have safety officers on some of our more acute calls, traumatic events, structure fires, extrications, but more importantly, it's going to give us mid-level supervision of our paramedics and field training officers. And EMS does make up 86% of our calls. And as many of you all may know, Chief McCarthy has retired. Today was his last day. So we have some shoes to fill. But more importantly, we actually have some big plans with these EMS captains. First order of business is for them to run the Regeneron program that we're going to be running over the next several months. And these positions would have been extremely valuable throughout what we went through here over this last 18 months and are going to provide a tremendous asset to the organization. Financially, we've been able to find the funds for this. Currently, the city participates in a subsidies program, PEMT, which is the Public Emergency Medical Transportation Program. And one of the things that I'm happy to say is through our participation, we have grown with this program. And while last year we received $267,000 in subsidies due to lack of funds being provided by Medicaid, this year it's expected to double at $430,000, so we've actually built in the money for these positions. That should almost be cost neutral to the organization, but a value much needed. And I'm prepared to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Curd in regards to the fire presentation?
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just thank you for your service and the service of all the firefighters. The emails that we get these days from some people don't always reflect, I think, the majority of the population and how they feel about our fire department, so I'm really appreciative. And I'm mostly appreciative that we keep the Singer Island folks over there on the island whenever we possibly can, and only take them off in the direst of emergencies. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, sir.
thank you. Chief Curd, I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague. We appreciate you. We're going to do everything for the department to make sure that we provide the services necessary, provide the facilities necessary. We appreciate the budget coming in with only a 5% change, knowing what we had to deal with this past year, knowing the pandemic that no one has ever experienced. And we're going to do our very best to give the facilities that your men and women deserve. So we're going to work on that aggressively over the next few months.
Thank you, and hearing that from you all really means a lot to me, and I think it means even more to the men and women who serve Riviera Beach who are feeling some kind of way right now, but we're going to work through that, and we're going to remain the consummate professionals that we always have been.
Yes, thank you, Chief Curd. I want to ask, in terms of these two new positions, how does that fit into our discussion at our last meeting in regards to our diversity plan for the fire department?
Well, this here doesn't tie into that plan. This is a tested position that there are certain qualifications, there are certain credentials that are met. We are embarking on sending people to school, but they have to have the desire to want to go to school. But this is a test that was held by Palm Beach State College to qualify them per our contract for the position. So it's basically mandated on how it's run by the way the contract is established with the IAFF.
Very good. Any other questions for Chief Curd? Thank you, sir, for your presentation.
Thank you. You all have a great evening.
You as well.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Councilperson Miller Anderson will be a tad tardy, and the mayor is feeling ill and will not be at this evening's budget session.
Thank you. Chief?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Council. This year, 2020-2022 fiscal year budget modification for the police department to add one communication supervisor position. That will get us up to national and state standards. That way we'll have coverage on all shifts. To add a public information officer, that person will help professionalize and keep the city at the level that we need to be whenever we have negativity coming to our city. The PIO officers have been really good across the state at dealing with hot topics such as what we're going through now, First Amendment people, whomever. We would like to add a crime analyst, an additional crime analyst. What our crime analysts would do, we have one crime analyst will be pinpointing the crime trend that we have in the city now. The other one will be going after our main targeted people who are committing crimes and where the hot spot. The current crime analyst we have now, she's doing 2 duties, and it's taking up a lot of her time. And working a maximum of 20 hours a month. It would give us additional coverage to handle little necessities, something at the park, crossing guards, and even traffic. Changes our budget just about a little more than 0.5% increase.
Any questions for the chief in regards to his presentation?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, I can't thank the fire guys. You know, they beat us, though, in softball, so I don't know. Maybe you need more thanks. You need more,
We need more guys,
you
yeah.
need more boosting up. But anyway, I should be serious. You folks do an amazing job, and we are so ever so appreciative of the work you do, putting your lives on the line every day. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. It's a job that sometimes is just thankless. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Chief, so I'm smiling because he warned me not to ask him questions, so
No, I'm sure he
I think I gotta ask. So
sure you
Chief,
did not.
the fire department, which is your counterpart that just left before you, they gave a nice presentation. They have a public information officer that's already, within the fire department. Is that not an option for the police?
It's not really an option because they're going to be doing two different jobs, and a good question. The public information officer we need will be a full-time position dealing with. We have a lot of criminals, and that relay this information, sworn police officer, including myself, to do the work, 4 or 5 of us to do the work that one PIO would be doing more professionally, so we can put those guys back to work.
One last question. The police technology administrator, is that a new job description? Because I thought we had someone in that position.
We currently have a person who manages all the security cameras in the city right now, all of our body-worn cameras, police radios, the antennas, and I don't get enough manpower hours out of him in a week because I have to bother him anytime the radios go down. He have to come in the middle of the night.
Okay, I understand.
We need 2 people for this job.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for the chief in regards to his presentation?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go
Just
ahead.
quickly, do all of our officers have body-worn cameras?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And they keep them on?
Well, to keep them on, when they go on a call, they turn them on.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair, the next presentation is going to be for the CRA.
That's you?
No, it isn't, but that's all right.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, there's been no significant modifications to the CRA budget. There is one reduction in FTEs. That is the operations manager position that we have. We made a modification with a departure of an employee and we had an employee serve in that capacity and was able to function and actually provide a significant increase in level of service. So we thought that it was prudent for us to save as it relates to that particular position. So the increases in the budget are associated with compensation increases for our CRA personnel. So there's not been any significant modifications or tweaks as a result of the changes, but there is one additional FTE that has been reduced from the CRA. I can answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. Evans, I thought that the utility district was before that.
It was.
Well,
I just told you.
I just hit the button.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead. You can go next, Mr. Jacobs.
so Mr. Evans, when do we see the capital for the CRA?
The capital will be sent out to the board. We're finalizing the actual budget document, and then when we have our budget meeting with the board on the 22nd of September, you'll see the entire document to include the capital monies.
Okay, all right.
So what does that mean? So that means that what, you were overstaffed at the CRA?
No, we're not overstaffed. We just had, we believed in the individual that we had in a position, gave them an opportunity, and elevated some other persons to assume additional duties and responsibilities, and it actually worked. So credit to Ms. Jenkins and the team and Mr. Evans as well to see that and recommend that. And so we believe that the reduction would not have any adverse impact to the CRA and our ability to provide service.
Okay, very good.
Ms. Evans,
Yes, sir.
does this account for increases for the ambassadors, this operating
That is correct, yes, sir.
How much is that?
Approximately 3%. And then they also get a step as well. So it depends on how long, what their tenure is with the agency. They also get an additional increase. But once I went over to the CRA, we also made sure that any persons that would be a ambassador was moved up to that livable wage at that $15 an hour. So we've made our staff whole with regards to that, and then they get their annual increase and a step on their anniversary date.
Madam Chair, again.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, the discussion I think we had a couple months ago, or maybe a month and a half ago, about holiday pay, is that going to be addressed in the fiscal year? Is that something that we've started this fiscal year?
One of the things that we've started that. So if a person does work a holiday, they are compensated what their peers would make on the city side. So we did already address that as a part of the conversation you and I have. So we've issued a directive related to that.
Hold on, Doc.
I'm waiting.
I'm still in control.
I'm not jumping in.
You had your, okay, and I appreciate that, Mr. Evans, because it is really, I thought was unfair to see, ambassadors working and every other person in the dependent districts of the city or within the city were either off and was paid or receiving some sort of compensation for holiday pay. So thank you for that, and I appreciate that. I'm sure the guys do. Let me tell you, I know our public works guys do a good job, but I'm on Broadway quite a bit, and I'm seeing these guys interacting with the public. I mean, they are really ambassadors. I mean, I've seen this guy weed eating. I mean, he's running and dashing through the intersection to pick up trash that's flying away. So I think they do really a great job, and I appreciate the work that they do, and thank you for making it happen for them. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
is there an assistant CRA director position in the budget?
There is not an assistant CRA director in the budget, but the monies for the executive director position still remain in the budget.
So is it your intention to hire somebody as an assistant over there?
We want to have a more robust conversation, because when we talked about economic development and having that, we do want to see ultimately where the board wants to land on that. So at this particular moment, we're keeping that monies in there as seed money. So then when we do come back and have a more robust conversation, then we can say, hey, is it an assistant director of economic development? What is the best mix to be able to facilitate the collective vision for the board? So we will bring that back to you for further
Okay,
conversation.
good. So I can still hold out hope that we can have an economic development director paid for by both CRA and the city. Thank you very much. I'm writing that down. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions in regards to the CRA budget overview? Very good.
All right, let me go.
Can we get back to there we go.
I can do the utility district if you'd like me to. No, just kidding. Ms. Jacobs will make this presentation for the utility special district.
Should I go ahead and get started?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For the record, my name is Deirdre Jacobs, and I'm the interim executive director of the Utility Special District. With regards to USD and the budget modifications, the changes that are being proposed are the addition of a backflow technician, an addition of a chief mechanic, an addition of a compliance technician, and 2 laboratory technician positions. The position of Compliance and Safety Officer is proposed to be reclassified to Compliance Manager. It is our intent to unfund a maintenance worker position, a senior equipment operator position, the senior office assistant position, as well as to unfund 2 water plant operator positions. If there are any questions, I can take them now.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So can you tell us how many backflow prevention specialists or technicians that we have? Because I thought we had one already in the budget.
No, actually, there's not one. The one that was there, the person that was performing those duties and responsibilities, the title was a senior maintenance, sewer maintenance mechanic. There was not a position that was dedicated in terms of the actual title of backflow technician.
So they just were operating in that role?
Yes, sir.
And I mean, so do we operate the lab? I thought most of the lab work was done outside.
It is, but our intent is if we were to bring in at least 2 of our own lab technicians, that we would be able to reduce some of the cost. All of the work would still be done outside in a certified lab tech, but right now we use our water plant operators to go out and do sampling and collection, and it takes away from their duties and responsibilities as water plant operators.
In the reclassification to compliance manager, I mean, I don't know what that means, but my question is, does that changes the pay scale? Does that gives it a different duties? Help me understand why that's important.
Yes, sir. That position will actually be responsible for supervising the 2 lab technicians positions, as well as partly supervising the compliance technician's position.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Jacobs in regards to the utility district? Ms. Jacobs, I want to thank you so much for your excellent work that you've done with the water plant to get us to this point. You are reclassifying positions, meaning that you're not trying to create more positions. You're trying to at least keep the budget as it is, and I can appreciate your effectiveness in doing that, and we really appreciate your work because, of course, every council person up here can tell you that most of the questions that we get or calls that we get is about water. So we really appreciate the fact that you are taking care of some of the issues that we have with our water plant. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, our budget went down this year.
I see
Oh, it was a decrease. Very good.
0.68%. Good job.
That's
Thank you,
efficiency.
Dr. Patel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Interim Cedric Clark, Public Works, Interim Public Works Director. Excuse me, a little nervous, so.
Don't be nervous, Mr. Cedric. You are doing an excellent job.
All right, the proposed budget modifications for FY '22, Public Works would be adding an operations manager position. We'll also like to propose upgrading the staff assistant to a senior staff assistant and downgrading the office manager position to executive staff assistant. The change of Public Works itself would be 10%, and the fleet service would be negative 36%. Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
how are you doing that?
I'm sorry?
How are you doing that? How are you reducing the fleet services by 36%? I see that it's 111%.
I'll defer that question to Mr.
Oh.
Sherman.
Fleet Services is no longer dealing with the police vehicles. Remember, we outsourced that process?
Yes.
So that's why you see that reduction.
Great. Good job. Thank you.
See, that program worked on both ends with Ori. The money, the jobs, it's just perfect. It's perfect.
I don't know if I agree with that, Madam Chair. Can I respond?
No, of course you can.
So when you do that, when you reduce fleet services by 36%, what happens to those positions that would be there? I mean, obviously, if the workload is now being reduced, what happens to those employees?
We still maintain employees. It's 21 is 6, and 22 will be maintaining 6. We still have the services of all the vehicles of the city vehicles, and also the heavy equipment.
So, Mr. Sherman, can you remind me? So they're falling under fleet services. So what does that mean as far as the existing vehicles? Those aren't the enterprise leases, right?
For the police department?
Right.
Yeah, the police department is the enterprise.
Right, but we already had an existing fleet. What happened with the services of those vehicles?
They're maintaining those as well.
So they're maintaining our regular vehicles?
Correct.
So then, I guess, what happens once those vehicles that we currently own reach the end of their useful life? Do we then trade them off to the fleet services company? What happens?
Yes, yep, they take those, they flip those over and bring us in new vehicles. And then your maintenance costs go down. And then the next cycle, they do the same thing, and, it keeps. So they maximize the life cycle on the vehicles because they're maintaining them. they want to get a good trade-in on them, so they, keep the vehicles and they turn them over a lot faster than we would. So it keeps that maintenance cost at a far lower level.
Okay, but then for the police side, the actual lease expense, where's that? Is that on the police
That was in their budget.
in their
Yeah.
operating?
Yep, it's in their operating budget, and if you actually, when you get the line items, or when you get the tentative budget, you actually see that the combination of the repairs and what they're paying to Enterprise is about $300,000 less than what they were paying Fleet Services.
So as it stands before the lease, how would we book that on the city's books? Would we amortize the cost of purchasing a vehicle across its useful life? Or do we just expense it right out?
We have been purchasing the vehicles through a lease program. So you'll see that it's actually in the debt service number. So we go out and we buy 20, 30 vehicles, and then in the debt service number is the payment for those vehicles. So now those leases are all running their course and will, fall off the books. And then again, you'll see the number exclusively in the police department budget.
Okay. So if I can ask Mr. Clark, so when you said they continue to work, but obviously there would be a deduction in how much the workload is, wouldn't it? I mean, just from natural, that if they're not servicing the police vehicles, then, I mean, that's less vehicles that they would service. What happens in that case? Does that reduces their workload? Do they get, assigned other duties?
Yes, it does. We would reassign them to help out within Public Works, but not to go outside their job scope. But we have how do I say it? They can work outside their class for 3 days, minimum of 3 days. But we can still use the work. We still actually Public Works staff dropped from like 40 people down to 26. So we're still understaffed. So we still can use the bodies.
Okay, and one last question. So I don't know if you'd be able to ask this, or perhaps it was a better question for the chief, but from an operational standpoint, if a vehicle goes down in police or perhaps even fire, is it, I guess, from a time perspective, is it easier to get it done at Fleet Services or in-house? Because, my natural thinking is that when you do things in-house, you get it turned around much faster, and I don't know, I guess that's my expectation. But is there any downtime in outsourcing to a Fleet Services to do maintenance?
What we have seen is because they have a multitude of contracts, they can find a place faster to get, the services that we need.
Okay. All right, good enough. I mean, thank you for that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Also, one of the things that we've talked about is the ability for our fleet mechanics that are obviously mechanically inclined to assist with some of the small engine repairs and other tools and equipment that Public Works uses, Parks and Recreation uses, and even in some cases, fire rescue. So there is other things that persons could do to assist in reducing the costs that we have to send out for services as well. So those duties and responsibilities would be absorbed by the personnel that's in the shop.
Madam Chair, last comment.
All right, go ahead.
So I understand the reason for suggesting that and I think it's a really great idea to do the ability to do the leases, but if we're saying that we're reducing Fleet Services by 36%, I don't know how long that's sustainable. At some point in the future, there's going to be a discussion about workload and whether or not we downsize on some of the Fleet Services, because the demand clearly is not there. If you're taking 36% of the budget out, then the demand won't be there, and those are going to be positions that maybe 2 years down the line, this board is going to be, contemplating on reassigning or unfunding certain positions. So I just want to caution you on that. I just don't see how just the simple mathematics in that says that, we're not downsizing or even outsourcing for that matter. But I can understand doing the lease payments, but I don't agree with, doing routine Fleet Services outside. I mean, quite frankly, when you go into that, it almost looks like a top level car garage of a, a high end, expensive dealership. So I would like to see our folks keep working on vehicles that we actually pay for, not those that are, leased vehicles. And I don't understand, and saying this from a respectful position, I don't agree. I just think that at some point, because the workload has been reduced, then the positions are gonna follow. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You want to, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to address Mr. McCoy. Actually, your point is well taken, and we spoke about that in city administration and public works because of the reduction, how it would affect the staff that's there in fleet services. So what we decided to do was to not do anything with the positions in this upcoming fiscal year, to just wait and see what would pan out over the next year, and to see if we could work with them and be able to intertwine them into other positions. So right now, we clearly understand where you're coming from, and we agree with it, but we're in a standing mode for the benefit of the employees that are affected.
You agree, or administration? Because
Administration,
I've never heard anybody agreeing with Troderick McCoy, so thank you for that.
Please. Thank you so much, Mr. Cedric, for your presentation. Is there any other questions in regards to Public Works? Thank you, sir. You did very well.
I have one
Madam
more.
Chair,
Don't
Madam
leave.
Chair, before he gets away,
Yes, ma'am.
is there a timeline for the replacement of the median plantings on Singer Island?
Yes, we do have a timeline, but.
You don't have to respond now,
Okay,
just send it to me.
All right.
Oh, Siri is trying to answer.
Oh, wow.
Siri is, oh, it was my watch.
Oh, my gosh. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Kashama Miller Anderson, who just joined the dais. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. For Stormwater, FY22, we're proposing budget modifications for unfunding the Stormwater Manager position. That the change would be a little over 1.5%.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
isn't that your position? Okay, that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Very good. Any questions in regards to Stormwater? Thank you, sir, for your presentation and your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Yes, Madam Chair. The next presentation will be Development Services, Director Clarence Sermons.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I am Clarence Sermons, the Director of Development Services. The changes for our department's funding for the coming fiscal year 22 are as indicated on the slide above. The top is related to a position swap that I worked out with Director of the IT department. We worked out a mutually beneficial swap of positions such that my community inspector position would be defunded to provide for funding for a new position for his department. And as you can see on the third bullet, that we would transfer in the GIS CAD technician position from his department and integrate that person with the operations of development services. Additionally, with the movement of the BTR operation into the development services department, 2 positions, the business tax receipt specialist, will be moved into our department, and as we absorb those operations, we expect to see an improvement in several of the different services that both of our departments work together to provide. And then finally, there will be funding provided for the comprehensive plan, and we are strategizing on the method of updating that and also integrating aspects of the Art in Public Places program with our long-range planning to provide for those programs, and we look forward to presenting a related resolution to the board for that in the near future. And that concludes the significant changes to the Development Services Department budget for the coming fiscal year.
Madam Chair.
I beat you, Doc.
Madam Chair.
No, go ahead, Troderick. I'm sorry, Mr. McCoy.
I was just trying to beat her to the punch because she was right there. But Mrs. Sermon, so code compliance, can you tell me how many I guess after the adoption of this, how many positions do we have as, you call them community officers or community? You use a different terminology than what I
Yes,
see.
we have 3 code compliance officers, and we have a code compliance community inspector. The community inspector position is the one that would be defunded as a part of the position change.
But that's different than compliance officer.
Correct. It is a junior officer, so to speak. They have lesser responsibilities, and they are not certified code enforcement officers.
Okay, but, so, I thought, with the ordinances that we adopted relative to code enforcement, I thought that there was going to be an increase in compliance officers. Am I not understanding?
There will be an increase due to the funding we are receiving from the Community Development Block Grant Program from the county. So we will see an influx of 3 additional code compliance officers, as well as a field inspector or field supervisor. So the staff will expand. Our current group of compliance officers will remain the same. But this junior officer or this junior inspector will be defunded, however.
So if I'm correct, you said we'll have an additional 3?
Correct, with the grant funding.
So how many in total after the adoption of this budget?
We will have 6 code compliance officers, including the grant-funded positions.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Botel?
Chair. Thank you. So this transfer of 2 business tax receipt specialists and the GIS CAD technician, those will be reflected in the finance department's budget and the technology department's budget as reductions?
Yes.
Is it pretty much a wash then?
Yes.
Okay, so your 15% change is primarily because of those 2 positions?
Would you say that's accurate, Mr. Sherman?
Your 15.63% increase in your personnel line, is that primarily because of those 2 positions?
Want me to respond? Oh, yeah. Well, it includes those 2 positions. And then what is built in there, it's a good-sized department, has a lot of SEIU employees.
they're all
So the
getting bonus.
SEIU contract is reflected in there as well.
Okay. And the operating section at 24.99% increase, is that primarily because of the comprehensive plan work?
Yes.
What is that, what makes up that operating line?
That's correct. Funding for the comprehensive plan is a big chunk of the additional funding that we did not have on the books this current fiscal year.
Okay. And I'm happy to know, as of, was it only last night that we were here? Yes, as of last night, Mr. Sherman mentioned that it won't be too long before I'll be able to be in Publix and look up somebody's permit, right?
Yes, the next correspondence you'll receive from our department will be related to training and how you can log into the system and be able to access information. There will be a plethora of public information available on there, and will also reduce, the amount of time staff has to respond to those requests because it will be publicly available.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, there's been a noticeable improvement in the quality of the output from the department since your arrival, and I thank you for that. People call me pretty regularly to say thank you. I mean, I know nudge, and I know, people call me to say, why can't you, but when it all is said and done, they're happy with the people in your department, Grace and Mary, and I don't want to name names, but yes, so thank you.
Thank you so much. The staff is working very hard over there, and we appreciate any feedback on their work.
Any other questions for Mr. Sermons in regards to developmental services? I do have one question, Mr. Sermon. What are the elements of the comprehensive plan that the funding will cover?
Yes, so the plan is to, over the next 3 years, ensure that we've covered all elements of the comp plan. And in the coming fiscal year, we expect to address the future land development section as well as housing. We are underway with current funding for this year to address the coastal construction and some perils of flooding issues that we needed to clean up and make consistent with new state regulations. So that section is underway currently, and then in the coming year, we will look at future land use as well as housing.
Very good. Thank you so much, and thank you for your staff and the hard work that you guys do. It definitely shows.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair, members of the board, this next presentation will be made by Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Richard Blankenship.
Good evening, Council. Richard Blankenship, Parks and Recreation Director. There are no significant budget modifications for FY 2022, so I'll like to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions for the Parks and Recs budget 2022?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So again, the personnel line, the increase of 12%, is that primarily due to raises
Yes.
and so on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Right. The next presentation will be made by Mr. Ronnie Freeman, Director of the Library Department.
My name is Rodney Freeman, Library Director. For FY 2022, there are no significant budget modifications, and I'm here to take any questions that you may have.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And thank you, Madam Chair. The 22% reduction in operating, can you speak to that?
I will turn that over to Mr. Sherman.
Who's not ready? Let's see.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I think that's attributable to how we are accounting for them being in the new space between YEP and the library department. So that's what it's attributed. Since they're sharing the space, there's shared cost in regards to that, and cost.
And it's a smaller space.
Right.
And when they were cited on the City Hall complex, they shared in all of the costs for the City Hall complex. So there's a big reduction in those costs.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions for our library? Thank you, sir, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Evans.
Madam Chair, the next presentation will be for the Information Technology Department made by Mr. Chris Prasad.
Good afternoon. So in our budget presentation, you'll see we have expanded to add a network administrator position and a security specialist position. Both those positions are pretty critical for our operation. One of the things the network admin will do is work on switches, routers, firewalls, and the security position will work on network intrusion prevention system, application security, which includes Tyler as well. And you'll see on the personnel and operating and capital, we have a reduction in the operating capital. The reduction is due to the fact that we're doing police laptops, and we're trying to do those now in this budget year. Mr. Sherman was gracious enough to find some money, so you'll see that big reduction there as well. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Prasad. We really appreciate your department. I just wanted to say that every time I call one of your guys for help, and I need it often, they're always on deck, and I can appreciate that. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So why wouldn't the laptops be in the police budget if they have a line for operating capital? Why wouldn't that be reflected in their budget?
We have tried to centralize all of the IT costs in one location, and then if you look under the individual department budgets, you will see a transfer from the police department over into IT.
Okay.
And thank you for that Tyler specialist position. That is really going to help.
Yeah, the position will deal with the security mostly on the backside, just to make sure we have some checks and balances.
Yes, very good. Any other questions for information technology? Thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Right. The next presentation will be made by Ms. Elizabeth McBride Ms. Eureka Young will make the presentation for Human Resources.
Good evening, Eureka Young for the Human Resources Department. For the fiscal year 2022, there are no significant budget modifications for the department.
Any questions for HR? Very good. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Evans.
Right. Next presentation is for the Procurement Department, and Ms. Elizabeth McBride will be making this presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the City Council. Elizabeth McBride, Deputy City Manager, on behalf of the Procurement Department. For fiscal year 2022, there are no significant budget modifications that have been made to the department's budget. The staffing levels will remain the same with 6 members of the staff. And there just was a small change in the budget items for personnel and operating.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. How many
Yes,
positions are vacant currently of those 6?
Present 3.
So what are we doing as far as filling those positions? Are all of them being advertised?
2 of them have been advertised, the director and the senior position, senior procurement position.
Okay. So is there an assistant director for this department or no?
No, basically, I think, well, with Ms. Penzelvision, she viewed the senior procurement specialist would be functioning more as that person. Okay.
Okay.
So I think we would save it for the new director to maybe make some calls about the positions too.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for procurement? Thank you for your presentation, ma'am. Mr. Evans?
The next presentation will be the city clerk.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Evans. The city clerk office budget has a slight increase in our operating costs as it relates to elections. Our 2022 election is our biggest election, and we are anticipating a runoff, or should I say we want to prepare for a runoff in the event that we do have one, which is the increase.
Very good. Any questions for the city clerk's office and their budget? Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair, I will be making the presentation for the legal department. On behalf of City Attorney Ms. Don Nguyen, there's been no significant budget modifications to the fiscal year 2022 budget, and I believe the change in personnel is attributable to the department being fully staffed.
Any questions for legal? Thank you. Next item.
Next department is Finance Department, made by Mr. Randy Sherman.
Yeah, for personnel changes, as we talked about, I'm going to actually start at the bottom here. We're transferring the 2 business tax receipt specialists. Those positions have been vacant for almost 7 months now. The 2 new employees actually start in the next 2 weeks, and they'll then be transferred from finance up to development services. Those 2 business tax receipt positions, though, are the backup to the cashiers. So they cover for lunch, they cover for vacations, and they cover for the busy times. By losing those 2 positions, we are adding 1 customer service rep. Right now, we only have 1, so this will actually just be a second. On Friday, our staff assistant, Sally Evans, retires, and we will be adding an executive assistant position and then unfunding her senior staff assistant position. So that's just a trade-off. Again, our budget is only up 5.2% and with 1 staff reduction net. I can take any questions.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Sherman, cashier and customer service, is that the same position?
Yeah, it's the same thing, I'm sorry.
So we're only gonna have, I guess after whatever changes, this position that's being added is going to total 2?
A total of 2.
But then what happens if we don't have the backup that's usually the BTR? Are they gonna be still performing that function?
No, the BTR staff will be exclusively upstairs in development services.
So no one would be at that window?
What I'll do, I have 2 senior customer service reps that I can pull forward if I need to. I have a billing technician that I can pull up to the counter. They're all cross-trained, and that's what we've been doing for the last 6-7 months, is pulling people from other positions to cover the window.
So I'm trying to understand, and I'm sorry if I don't get it,
Okay,
but
that's fine.
you have 2 customer service, and then you said you have 2 senior customers?
Senior customer, and typically what they do is they deal with the call center. They're the more experienced people. They deal with the customers in the call center. If I need to pull them, they can obviously work the window.
So in total, how many customer services that we have that
I will
deals
have
with?
4, 2 of them are senior, and 2 of them will be
Okay.
at the lower level.
And I guess we're adding 1, and I'm hopeful. Well, I guess, can you speak to where I think we mentioned it last night, we're over I guess, those hurdles with transitioning the new system. So I guess, does this 4 satisfy, I believe, what you expect to happen in this upcoming budget?
I do. The customers, I would say about a quarter of our customers are on auto pay. We probably have maybe about 30% use the lockbox. We do still have those customers, though, that like to come in, and a lot of them are cash-based, and, they come in and they want to do over the counter. But, we're probably getting maybe even about 400 payments a day on the kiosks. So both the one that's outside and in the lobby. So one is able to kind of hold the window. Where we tend to get, the line starts to build up is when we get new applications, and then when we get the BTR, and they're trying to do both the BTR and the utility. So by moving the BTR upstairs, that'll then free up some time as well.
Okay, so are we looking at automating the connection of utility accounts to some online version or something like that?
We are. There's a customer self-service feature that they will actually be able to go on and do their application, request a turn on, request a turn off, those types of things. That's the next phase. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to. Sorry, guys, I went to the library for the first time today. Every time I had a conflict or I was out of town, and I just love the self-checkout option.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much easier for everybody. I mean, the staff, they are there to assist the patrons inside. So I think moving towards that whole automation process is always good. And I think it's certainly happening in the library and in other departments. I'm glad to see that, we're making those steps. Obviously, this was something that we didn't expect to have so many stops in the road, or bumps in the road, I should say. But thank you for that, and I appreciate it, Mr. Sherman.
Thank you.
Any other questions for finance? Next item, Mr. Evans.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the presentation for a city administration with regards to a budget modification. We are unfunding a position that has been a vacant marketing specialist position, and unfunding a multimedia communication specialist, and adding a public information officer. What we've seen as a result of the increased demand and foot traffic on the website and social media, and the community's desire to hear from the city real time, that it's more suitable to have a position that is focused on those communication elements. You heard earlier that the chief of police is moving with a public information officer, and we were assuming a lot of those responsibilities, and then we transitioned those to the department and saw the uptick as it relates to interaction. And so we're looking to modify that position, and that person will assist at being, the MC for events, spokesperson on behalf of the city, working on marketing collateral, working in collaboration with Mr. Stevens, so he's not necessarily the one doing all the video shoots and stories. They will actually be, for all intent and purpose, almost like our beat reporter and do a multitude of stories, activities, and then Marcia would be able to focus more specifically on special events and projects and initiatives versus kind of serving in that particular capacity. So that's the only modification to the city administration budget.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
so the internal auditor is under you, or is it under finance?
It's under city administration.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't want to sit here and ask that you tell me those 13 positions, but, I mean, am I missing something? That's quite a few.
The youth empowerment, civil drug court, all those other divisions fall under city administration.
But that's not the way it was. But, so last night, their presentations were separate as to their goals, but
Right.
the budget, that's not been that way, Mr. Evans, right?
We've always had it separated because their responsibilities are so unique, and we don't want it to get buried into what is city administration. So we purposely separate it so you can see what they do and what they focus on versus a situation where we roll it into city administration and move forward with just broad overarching goals. So we distinctly separated them for the purposes of being able to have that discussion with the board and sharing what they do on a regular basis.
So you have civil,
Youth empowerment,
communications?
communications, civil drug court,
Economic
development,
and the audit.
and then
Reentry?
reentry, yes, reentry, and then the assistant and deputy manager and the assistant too.
Well, Mr. Evans, I don't want to make things difficult, but, I mean, for me to make a decision, there's no way that I even understand what city administration's budget means when you're telling me you have this conglomerate department that has 4 sub-departments that, I mean, I can't even see the true numbers for what.
And we break it down in subsequent slides. This is just the entire department, and then we break it down the same way. It follows the same format that we followed yesterday. So you'll get a presentation from on civil drug court, youth empowerment, and the like. So it breaks it down a little bit more granular. So you're
Okay.
not seeing just the large numbers rolled up.
Has it not always been that way?
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It has.
So I just want, Madam Chair.
Wait, can I finish?
Go ahead, sir.
So, Mr. Evans, so my question was, so if it's broken down into different departments, why was the need to put it under city administration? That's the management style, but that's not the way the budget has been presented to us in past years.
That is how it has been, but they're separated. They're separated to be able to communicate what their focus and what their function is. Because if we did it just to keep it as a large department, it would get lost, and we didn't want to lose it in that particular format. That's why we've broken it out as such.
But Mr. Evans, again, when I look at that CAFR book that I have in the car, ironically, I looked at it today. It's not presented in that fashion, and I mean, to present a budget and you're looking at the annual report and they're not exactly, city administration doesn't have those different departments in the comprehensive annual financial report.
Well, the budget document since back to 2017, I think even before, it's always been separated as such. And if we were to bring it into a specific department, then this is the slide that you see and nothing else gets communicated. And since there's grants and other components of that, that's why we broke it out. Eventually, and depending on the growth of the city and where some of these operations go, you may see conceivably some of these operations become departments, or it becomes a maybe health and human services department, and under that health and human services department, you have those other tentacles that are youth empowerment, reentry, civil drug court, or what have you. That's another iteration. We didn't want to move to that yet, but I think that's the next phase as to where you see with those particular operations. But they are conceivably, they're divisions within city administration.
Okay, well, that's not the way it's presented in the annual report, Mr. Evans.
Well, in the CAFR document, we have there's standard documents and boilerplates that are incorporated in that. But in the budget document, it's been presented like that since for the last 5 years.
Oh, excuse me, do you mind? So, Mr. Evans, I mean, from our role as being fiduciary agents, how do I look at the budget and then match it with the annual report when I guess what you're saying to me is, yes, it's consolidated in the budget, but it's not in the annual report.
If it's the pleasure of the board to roll them up into one specific department, we can do that.
But excuse me, Madam Chair. I mean, I'm really trying to get at something here, and I'm clearly have somebody in the audience that has some commentary.
Go ahead, sir.
So, Mr. Evans, I'm not suggesting that, but it's very difficult for me to legislate if you're giving me a document that I have to now compare to a report that doesn't even. I mean, they're not encompassing the same composition. So that's what I'm saying, and it's not necessarily that I'm supporting that it needs to be changed. It should be consistent. If it's going to be that way in the annual report, then that's what the budget should read. And it shouldn't be having to extract out information and then bifurcate it and dissect it. That just doesn't make sense from a governing standpoint. If you want to see exactly if Parks and Rec was able to stay within their budget, you want to go back to the same budget document that was presented to you at the beginning of the year instead of, trying to extract it out of there. And I mean, from an accounting perspective, that's just exactly how you follow how the budget plan is being followed. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So I want to be clear about this. So if I look at the Youth Empowerment Center, the 2.5 staff level full-time FTEs are incorporated into the 13 that
Correct.
are on administration, right? Okay. And likewise, for example, the increase in operating of the youth empowerment is incorporated in the, okay. Thank you, it's clear to me, thanks.
Do you not consider those units or divisions and not departments, right?
Correct.
They're what do you call it? They're divisions underneath city administration.
City administration is the department, they are divisions within the department.
Very good, thank you. Next item.
Next.
I'm sorry, anyone has any other questions for city administration?
I already moved.
Thank you. I'll be making the presentation on behalf of Ms. Grimsley for Youth Empowerment. There is no significant modifications. There is some increases associated with some of the operating and expenditures with regards to the new space, and the space has in essence doubled. So that's why you're seeing some cost increases related to that. But a lot of the monies that we do receive are associated with grant funding.
Madam Chair, may I actually add?
Yes, go ahead.
I just do want to point out, I don't want people to look at that personnel line item and think that's just 2.5 employees. That does include 25 youth workers that are also budgeted that, come in under.
But they're under the grant money.
But they're included, right.
Right, all right, very good.
But I didn't want to show 27.5 positions at the bottom, so.
Well, I don't think that in any of these you can include grant positions, did you?
No, I'm sorry, maybe I misheard. These are not grant positions. These are, again, when she brings in the summer help and she runs those programs, they actually do get a wage.
Okay.
And also the money associated with the cafe operation and the incubator spot as well, so that's why the costs have increased. But they're not full-time FTEs.
Very good. Any other questions for youth empowerment? Next item.
All right, next item, I believe, Mr. Sherman, you're taking on civil drug court?
Yeah, civil drug. Again, there are no significant modifications. There's no change in staff. And again, the overall budget is actually decreasing slightly. We actually were able to, last year's 20, and I want to tell you why the number went down. The 2021 budget actually had a position that included a grant position. So that grant position has now been properly accounted for, and that's why there's a drop in the personnel line.
Any other questions in regards to the civil drug court? Next item.
Who's doing reentry? I'm going to do reentry as well.
Sure.
Again, reentry, there are no significant changes, no changes in the staffing levels. And again, you see that there is an increase in that salary line. And again, that's because we are now fully picking up the costs of the director's position. So there's been a change in what's being funded with the grant. So there's more coming into the general fund, but there's actually no changes in the operations.
Very good, thank you. Any questions for the reentry program? Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
What did you say the personnel costs were for? I mean, other than the two, is it for the?
No, that was on the youth, the YEP program.
Well,
Here it's a shift between grant positions and non-grant positions.
Okay, but that wasn't the case with the youth empowerment.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
All right, very good. Any other questions for any of the presentations presented this evening? If not, Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair and members of the board, if there is no other questions from the board, the next budget workshop that we have is slated for Thursday at 6 p.m. We will ask for confirmation of direction from the board as it relates to any items that you've seen or any questions that staff may have as a result of the budget conversations. At yesterday's budget meeting, we did talk about your Riviera Beach 2030 and some tweaks and modifications that the board wanted to put forward as goals and objectives, and that will be coming back to you in a subsequent presentation, but will be incorporated in the budget document as overall goals and objectives for the legislative office for the city of Riviera Beach. Also, one of the things to be included is obviously the discussion or the legislative priorities both on the state and the national level. We will be bringing back a legislative agenda for you to consider at your meeting in September, and then that would also be incorporated in the budget document related to the items that you'd like for us to focus on. One of the components that will also be addressed at Thursday's meeting is compensation and classification. One of the things that we've been tasked with is looking at compensation and classification with regards to where your Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees are, so a lot of your supervisors, managers, and department directors. We have done some research with regards to that and want to talk about some options to be able to address some of the compensation and compression issues that are a result of some of the collective bargaining contracts that we've executed in the past, and making sure there's parity amongst peers. Another thing that we also will be discussing is we want to make sure, especially with the SEIU contract, that we look at peer on the CRA side. And one of the things that we're looking to do related to compensation and classification is to marry up the CRA positions with the positions on the city side, so there's uniformity and consistency. So if a person transfers from a like position in the CRA to the city, or if they transfer from the city to the CRA, there is no confusion or loss of wages or benefits or what have you. So we're looking to make sure there's parity amongst that. So that's going to be discussed at your meeting on Thursday, and then we have the first reading of the budget, which is slated for 6 p.m. on September 8th. That will be the first reading, and then the second reading will be at your second meeting, which will be the September 15th meeting. And at this time, Mr. Sherman, if you have any additional comments. If not, Madam Chair, that concludes staff's presentation.
Very good. Any comments from the board? Go ahead.
I just had a question about the parking spots. I know it has nothing to do with the budget, but are we supposed to be parking somewhere else now? Maybe it does have something to do with the budget. Yeah, like,
Yeah, we got
where are
assigned
we
electric
parking now?
vehicles.
Say that again?
We all got assigned electric vehicles.
Oh, okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. All right, that'll work.
I did have a conversation, Madam Chair, I did have a conversation with Director Blankenship with regards to the spaces, and they are supposed to be replacing the spaces concurrently. So those spaces are not supposed to be utilized yet until the spaces that you all utilize is replaced. And so Director Blankenship assured me that there are spaces that are being accommodated, and I'll be able to provide you a diagram on that certainly this week.
Thank you.
Very good. No other questions? Meeting is adjourned.